Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. To start off today's show, I have a quick question because we're going to be talking about the wide receiver room, everything that entails. And one question that I think a lot of Texans fans have is who out of these two guys will be on the 53-man roster to start next season? John Mechie III, Xavier Hutchinson. I don't think both of these guys make the Texans' final roster going into next season. So I'm going to ask you at the top of this show, if you had to pick one of these guys to keep, who would it be? If you think it's going to be Mechie on the roster, type Mech. If you think it's going to be Xavier Hutchinson, type X. I'll be looking down below in the comments section. Coming up on today's program, I'm going to be evaluating the state of the wide receiver room because some big moves have been made in Houston. We'll get into that in the show as well, but I just want to kind of entail and detail everything you need to know around the wide receiver room for the Houston Texans, looking at the latest news and rumors around the squad. So here's the updated Texans wide receiver depth chart, and honestly, I added Xavier Hutchinson in as wide receiver 3 just to add more guys to the graphic, but I think it's only wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. And behind that is just a massive question mark because I don't know if it's going to be a Xavier Hutchinson, a Justin Watson, Braxton Berrios, John Mechie, Jared Wayne, Johnny Johnson III. And Tank Dell, I don't think he plays this next season. But at the end of the day, I don't think this wide receiver room is nearly finished. I don't think it's close to being done. And I believe they will add at least 2 more receivers via free agency or the NFL draft. And I was going to, talk about on today's show, I don't know in free agency who they could target, but Nick Caserio does it again. He makes some more cap gymnastics happen for this Texans team. The latest coming from Texans Cap. If you're not following Texans Cap on X, you must not care about the Houston Texans. Did not expect this. Per source, Houston completed a max restructure with Titus Howard, creating $11.464 million in cap space in 2025. So that's huge. That gives the Texans more money to play with. Nick Caserio, more money to make deals happen. So we turn our attention to free agency because, like I said, the Texans will add more wide receivers this offseason, either in the draft or free agency. So do you maybe look at one of the top guys left in free agency? Amari Cooper, we've been all over the Stefon Diggs back to Houston train. Will he return? Will he go to another contender? That is probably one of the biggest names to look at on this list. Stefon Diggs, Keenan Allen. I don't believe he really comes down to Houston. I don't really see the fit there either with Tyler Lockett. Brandin Cooks has been gaining some traction amongst different Texans content creators, people who cover this team, of a possible reunion back in Houston. Remember, Brandin Cooks was with the Texans for a couple of seasons. Actually, his last 1,000-yard receiving season was with the Houston Texans. So all of these guys are some top guys to look at if the Texans want to make a splash in the wide receiver room. I don't necessarily see that happening. I could see them spending that money elsewhere, adding maybe somebody on the defense or one of these bigger offensive linemen, free agents available. Some value free agents they might look at, though. Elijah Moore is a name that I've heard. Tyler Boyd, who's played with the Titans the past couple seasons. Obviously, we all know Robert Woods. He would be the most unsexy signing of the offseason or re-signing is if they went out and brought back Robert Woods. Good team leader, good guy. I really respect Robert Woods, but if we're looking at, upgrading the wide receiver position, I don't know if Robert Woods really pushes the needle. Same with Rondale Moore, who, was a second-round pick coming into the NFL, but injuries have plagued him throughout his entire career, highlighted by last year where he went to the Atlanta Falcons and didn't play a single snap, got hurt in training camp in preseason. So these are some value guys. I could see them adding maybe one of these guys in free agency, but I kind of lean towards one of those first guys because, in my opinion, where the Texans are at right now, you saw the depth chart. It doesn't make sense to keep on adding wide receivers unless you think they're a starting caliber guy, going to be that third option next to Christian Kirk and Nico Collins at this point in the offseason. You added a bunch of, guys who are going to compete at the bottom of the roster, going to compete with the Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie. You brought in like a Braxton Berrios, a Justin Watson, some other names that could, bring in some competition on the lower level. But in terms of the Texans' wide receiver room and receiving threats for CJ Stroud, at this point in the offseason, if you're not adding somebody who's going to be on the 53-man roster, who's going to start for this team moving forward, I don't think it makes sense to make any sort of moves in the wide receiver room. And I will say this, if the Texans do sign anybody or they do make a trade, we will be breaking it down. We'll have a video for you. That's why you hit that subscribe button, because when news happens around your Houston Texans, we break it down here on the channel. We are your one-stop shop for Texans news and rumors here at Texans Today. Over 28,000 subscribers so far and still trucking along. Thank you to everybody who's hit that sub button so far. And if you haven't already, hey, it's 100% free. There's nothing to lose. If you want more Texans content, you're in the right spot. Now, let's turn our attention now to the draft. This is where a lot of people think the Texans could probably add somebody. And these are just some round one guys that I kind of listed of. If the Texans want any of these names, they will have to spend a first-round pick on one of these guys. A Matthew Golden, I don't think he makes it to the Texans pick at 25. Same with Emeka Egbuka. The jury's out on whether or not he's a top 20 prospect in this year's draft, but I could definitely see him going before the Texans pick. Luther Burden is an interesting name, somebody who is getting a lot of round one hype at the start of, the draft process. And at this point, a lot of people think maybe he's a round two guy. Jayden Higgins is one of the biggest risers in this draft process. A massive X-style receiver who put up a lot of production at Iowa State. He's been getting a lot of buzz to go end of round one, early round two. So I decided to add him in here. And I know we're talking wide receivers, but Colston Loveland is another guy who's been getting a lot of round one hype. I know he's a tight end, but at this point, we're looking at receiving options, and a guy like Colston Loveland you could add as like a larger slot receiver tight end combo. So I just added him on the list. If the Texans want to add him as a receiving threat, I also believe they'll have to use a round one selection. And I like these guys. Obviously, adding like a Emeka Egbuka would be awesome for CJ Stroud, would be awesome for this offense. But with the recent developments, I think the Texans need to go O-line in round one. I think it'll take a, just massive guy to fall in the draft, somebody who the Texans absolutely are falling in love with, or there's just a massive run on offensive linemen before the Texans pick for them not to go O-line in round one. I think it's too big of a need. I think the moves that they made already this offseason, getting rid of Shaq Mason, trading away Laramie Tunsil, trading away Kenyon Green, there's been too many guys who've been sent away for you to not replenish that position. So I think the Texans will go O-line in round one and then go wide receiver maybe in round two or round three, which leads me to the next part of today's video where we'll be looking at the best day two receivers that fit for the Houston Texans. Before we get into those guys, though, our friends over at Fanatics have some great deals on jerseys. If you're looking for a new Texans jersey, if you're in the market to get some new threads, well, go check out our friends over at Fanatics. If you go to chatsports.com/Texans jerseys, that'll send you straight to the Texans jersey page on Fanatics. This link lets them know that we sent you over there. If you're looking for a new jersey, go check them out today. One more time, it's chatsports.com/Texans jerseys. That link will be available to you in the comment section and description of today's video. That battle red Stingley looks insane. You want it? You want maybe a different Texans jersey, go check them out today over on Fanatics. Now, I kind of wanted to split it into kind of two different categories for the options in round two, round three. So these are guys who I would say play more in the slot. Obviously, in today's NFL, and especially in this Texans offense, you'll see a lot of guys move slot, X, all over the field. But these guys, I think, are these slot options in round two, round three. My favorite out of these, and shout out the Texans 22 podcast with Leo, Josh, VT. They really put me on this guy, Jaylin Noel. And we're talking about, risers at the combine. He might have risen his stock more than anybody. Look at his production last year at Iowa State. 80 receptions, 1,194 yards, 8 touchdowns on the year. He is a shifty guy, and a lot of teams are looking at him to possibly come in and boost their wide receiver room in round two. I've heard a lot of buzz around Jaylin Noel even being a late round one type of receiver. I would love the pick of Jaylin Noel in round two. Same with this next guy, Bech from TCU, another And I know, he's a bigger wide receiver, but in this Texans offense, in this Kyle Shanahan scheme, he kind of mocks as a bigger slot receiver, a really good run blocker as well. This past year, over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns for the Horned Frogs. He really showed out there in Fort Worth for TCU. He could be a decent option, and he's been a really popular pick amongst Texans fans if they want to go wide receiver on day 2 in the NFL draft. Some other guys that I've been looking at in the slot, and this is somebody who maybe he falls in the draft, and maybe you can get him, before the combine. A lot of people were saying, no, Tez Johnson, he's the next Tank Dell. He's the next Tank Dell. Did not perform at all, well at all. I'm not going to mince words. He was really bad at the NFL Combine. His numbers didn't test well. He really came in pretty short. You see right there, 5'9", 154 pounds. I do think, though, he is a Denver Bronco. He's basically brothers with Bo Nix. If you don't know the story, Bo Nix's family basically adopted Tez Johnson, brought him into their home, and, raised him throughout his high school career. I think he's a Denver Bronco at the end of the day, but could be a decent option if he does fall in round 3, maybe into round 4. Another good slot option who this guy was absolutely tearing it up at the combine, at I believe at the Senior Bowl as well. Xavier Restrepo from Miami. He was Cam Ward's one of his top options for the Hurricanes this year. 69 receptions, over 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns on the year. He could be another decent option if you're looking towards a slot option, because I know you have Nico Collins, who he plays in the slot as well, but he's a true X-style receiver. Christian Kirk can play in the slot, play on the outside as well. Xavier Restrepo is a great option. Jalen Royals, I didn't, honestly, this was kind of a tweener guy. I didn't know where to put Jalen Royals. Can play the slot, can play outside. A very intriguing prospect coming out of Utah State. And the jury's still out on Jalen Royals. I've seen people saying, oh, yeah, he's a round 2 guy. And I've seen people saying, no, he's more of a round 3, round 4 style receiver, an option there. The one guy I want to highlight, though, for your Houston Texans, and it's a name that I've been getting a lot. People have been DMing me this guy. Hey, you got to check him out. Hey, you got to check him out. And I think he might be the biggest boom or bust prospect in the 2025 NFL draft. This guy right here, Savion Williams from TCU. And I was talking to our 49ers host, Chase Sr., who's been, taking a deep dive on his game as well. Obviously, 49ers run that Shanahan-style system, that West Coast system. He said he built like a massive Deebo Samuel. 6'5". He's 6'5". He's a great gadget guy, really good at high-pointing the ball and those back shoulder fades in the red zone. I think he could thrive in a Shanahan-like system. The only problem is you're taking a guy who's, like I said, like a gadget guy. He's great on in and rounds. He's great on screens, run after the catch, that yak ability, yards after the catch. He's a very intriguing prospect to me. When you have somebody at his size, 6'5", who can run and move the way he does, it's a very intriguing prospect. Now, the reason why it's a boom or bust is he has some problems on his, other route, like going down the route tree, and then also drops. He has a little bit of a case of the dropsies. So, kind of makes me a little hesitant to take him. But if you're looking to possibly hit a home run and you're not worrying about striking out, this guy might be the best boom or bust prospect that you can get in round 2 or round 3 of this year's NFL draft. I'm going to break down some more day 2 wide receivers, but let me know down in the comment section. Like I said, I've had a lot of people talk to me about Savion, message me, hey, you got to check out his highlights. Hey, you got to check out his tape. Let me know. What's a wide receiver you think the Texans should look out outside of round 1? We all know Matthew Golden. We all know Emeka Egbuka, those top options there. But let me know. Later in the draft, maybe round 2, round 3, maybe even past that, round 4, round 5, round 6, go down in the comments and let me know a wide receiver that I need to study up more on for your Houston Texans. I'll be looking down there at the comments. Now, let's look at the outside wide receiver options in round 2, round 3. These are more of your traditional X guys, tall, lanky wide receivers that are going to be on the outside, where if you draft one of these guys, it'll be him and Nico on the outside and Christian Kirk mostly working in the slot. First guy, Elic Ayomanor from Stanford. I absolutely love this dude. Obviously, smart kid, went to Stanford. And you see the production there, and you're like, Jeremy, I mean, it doesn't seem like he was that impressive at Stanford. You also have to remember the offense that he was in the quarterback that was throwing him the football. That Stanford offense, he was most of that Stanford offense this past season, and his numbers in previous years were better than his 2024 stats. A really good combine for Ayomanor as well. He's an option in round 2 if he's there on the board for the Texans and they go O-line in round 1. I would be very interested in the Texans taking him. Another interesting option for the Texans if they're looking for a true X-style receiver, Tre Harris from Ole Miss. 6'3", 205 pounds, 60 receptions, 1,000 yards, a bigger receiver, but he also gives you somewhat of that yak ability as well after the catch. I like his route running. I like his ability. Like I said, after the catch, he's another intriguing option for your X receiver. Pat Bryant, which I've seen people saying, oh yeah, he's more of a round 3, round 4 guy, another X-style receiver in that Illinois' Illini offense. Pretty good this past year. 54 receptions, 984 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Another option for the Texans. And then Tory Horton, who this past year had a down year, and you might know him. Him and his quarterback over there at Colorado State famously turned down a huge NIL deal and said, no, we're trying to create something here at Colorado State. Obviously, that did not work out for Horton, but still a great prospect, a great option if you're looking at another wide receiver option, probably in round 3 and on would be Tory Horton. That's all I have for you on today's video. Follow me on Twitter at Jeremy Chuggs because, like I said at the top of the show, Nick Caserio just made a move, clearing up over $11 million in cap space. So there should be more moves to come, and I'll be breaking it down on Twitter and, of course, here on the channel. Another reason why you got to hit that subscribe button, because when Texans news happens, we break it down. Don't miss out on the latest going on around your Houston Texans by not hitting that sub button because, hey, you don't want to be the guy at work the next day who's like, I have no idea what's happening around the Texans because you're not subscribed to Texans Today.